Time now for Football at 4. John McMullen at JF McMullen, Sports Illustrated. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we take a look at some of the NFL stuff, the Eagles draft, continuing that conversation and more. Johnny Mac, what's going on, pal?
Not much. Trying to stay out of the wind, Mike.
It was very windy out there this morning. Now, I've been inside since about 10:30, so I don't know if it's settled a bit, but it was very windy.
It is not settled.
No.
It is windy.
Very windy. All right. Well, a couple things to get into on the Eagles front. One, a old friend is back. Corey Clement signed yesterday. Now, he was non-tendered. He was a restricted free agent. Then he got non-tendered, so he was a free agent. Apparently didn't have a lot of hits on the free agent market back there. So Corey Clement is back. He had a pretty big impact as a rookie. His second year, His third year, really nothing. In fact, did not have a carry last year before he finally left with that shoulder injury. So Corey Clement back. Is he a part of the plans? Is he gotta make this team, or do you see him as a guy who is not only back but will have a role?
Well, I think right now he's got a role. I think a lot depends on if the Eagles add a veteran running back in the coming days, and we've reached sort of that plateau of the offseason. If you go back to the Super Bowl season, for instance, where he was a Super Bowl hero, and that's where Corey kind of became a favorite, and obviously he's a local guy, South Jersey guy as well, so it's easy to root for him. But the fact that he played so well in the Super Bowl, but if you go all the way back to that offseason before, that's May is where you got the LeGarrette Blunts of the world, the Chris Longs of the world. So there's that, and you've already started to see it with the Eagles by bringing Corey Clement back. They picked up Casey Tucker off waivers as an offensive tackle. You have this phase where you come out of the draft and you've looked at your depth chart. You say, okay, we weren't able to get this. We got to go out and get it from what's left on the free agent market. And that's where the Eagles are, and that's why Corey's back. They weren't able to get a running back in the draft, signed a couple of undrafted guys, but you can't count on them, even though Corey himself is proof that it can happen for you. But that's not good to just hand an undrafted guy a job. So it's no surprise he's back. I mean, the Eagles didn't tender him because that was pretty expensive. That would have been over $2 million. So now they got him back for the vet minimum, which is a little over $800,000. So they save a little money. They know he wanted to come back. He said that today on a Zoom call with us. Never seriously entertained other offers. And part of that was also he's coming off shoulder surgery. He wasn't cleared till about 2 weeks ago. So we talked about the off season and the pandemic, and guys looked at by various medical personnel. That complicates things. And so the shoulder injury, the shoulder surgery was a big part of it as well. But right now, I mean, he'd be the third running back unless the Eagles are able to get another veteran running back. And then you would start to say he's got to compete for a job.
Yeah, when I saw him come back, of course, the next question is there's some other veterans out there, Jason Peters, Vinny Curry. I mean, you just talked about this is the time of the year after the draft, when people say, hey, you had a lot of holes to fill. That's why you don't draft a guy in the second round. Well, now's the time where the guys the holes you didn't fill on draft day, you start to try to go to get that third tier free agent or even that fourth tier guy. And you just mentioned some names that they've gone in the past and gotten, but could they go back down the Vinny Curry road? Could they maybe look at a guy like, do they look at wide receiver Paul Richardson, I think still out there. Logan Ryan is a corner that's available. I mean, do they look to add to some of those holes at this time of the year now?
Yeah, I think they will at certain positions. To me, it's a couple conflicting things. Running back was an obvious one because they weren't able to get a running back in the draft, unless you're one of these loonies who think they're going to turn Jalen Hurts into a running back, which they are not. But They thought about J.K. Dobbins in that second round, but obviously they went in a different direction. So they weren't able to get that position. They got plenty of bodies at wide receiver. I can't imagine they would want to bring in another veteran. Remember, not only did they draft 3 players, but they also traded for Marquise Goodwin in the draft. So essentially you got 4 bodies at that particular position. So I don't think that's natural. And to me, Peters and Curry are the most interesting for obvious reasons, but you know, there's so many moving parts, particularly with Jason Peters, because Howie Roseman has been very, very consistent saying we need to get younger, we need to get more cost effective. You're talking about a 38-year-old left tackle, but you're also talking about a 38-year-old left tackle who's going to the Hall of Fame, who's really, really close with the owner of the team. And he had all those whispers about Andre Dillard before the draft, about how they soured on his makeup and things like that. So that part's interesting. And then Vinny at 32, same type of thing. I mean, you have a ton of bodies at defensive end. Josh Sweat moving up from that 4th rotational end to number 3, at least you pencil that in. And then you have like a cast of thousands. People forget about Sharif Miller. He was a 4th-round pick last year. You traded this year's 4th-round pick for Jannard Avery, and you have Joe Osman, and you have Casey Toohill, who you drafted this year. So I don't know. If Howie is true to what he said, to what he has said consistently, he wants to get younger. I think you got to turn the page on both of those players, to be honest.
Yeah, especially, John, if you were going to pick one over the other, I would think Peters really has – I mean, you could say Peters is better than Dillard, Peters is better than Prince, but then you're sitting 2 younger guys, and you can't, I just don't see how you can do that at this point.
Yeah, I don't see how you can. But well, actually, I do see how you can, and I'm going to explain it. If the Eagles bring back Jason Peters – it's coming from the top. That's who it's coming from. And that's Jeffrey Lurie putting his foot down and saying, you know what? This is my guy who probably didn't get a job because of the pandemic, because we just talked about Corey Clement's health, and that's a 25-year-old. This is a 38-year-old and he's had significant injury issues. So in theory, if you're one of these teams looking for a left tackle, like the Jets or Cleveland, some have speculated on, or Minnesota, any of these teams that are kind of desperate at that particular position, well, you might say, okay, this guy can get us through a year, but we have no idea what his body is, how his health is. So I think this whole situation has made it really, really difficult. And I think Jeffrey Lurie was sort of hoping he would get another job. Now that he doesn't, just might say, you know what, we're bringing him back.
That would be really interesting because you drafted 2 offensive linemen in the draft. What did you think, though, if you had that conversation on draft day? You're saying, look, is Peters an option to bring back? Because if not, I won't draft a second offensive lineman. I mean, maybe they don't draft a guy.
One of those things. I don't think this would be a football decision. I think the football people would be trying to talk him out of it. I'm just speculating if he's back. I'm telling you the reason he's going to be back.
You know, I know what you're saying. I'm saying, but like if Howie Roseman would check, you know, knowing that, like, man, is Lurie going to make me bring Peters back? He hasn't got a job. You know, am I going to be forced into bringing him back? And if so, can you tell me now so I don't draft? And this way I could draft a different.
Yeah, I mean, and Prince, as you bring up, I mean, that's a guy with a high ceiling. I mean, you might not think it because he's a later round pick, but you're exactly right. I mean, you traded up in 2019 in the first round to get this guy, Andre Dillard, and then you drafted another high ceiling tackle the next year. You talked about getting younger, and then you bring back Jason Peters. From a football sense, it makes no sense whatsoever. So the only reason Lane Johnson was on, I think, NBC Sports Philadelphia yesterday talking about it. He said he wouldn't be surprised. So, but it's not like Lane's involved in personnel decisions, but everybody in that organization knows how much Jeffrey Lurie likes Jason Peters. and that's why you leave the door open.
I want to go real quick back to Corey Clement, and you mentioned this is Miles Sanders' position. He's the guy. Boston Scott, is he like a definite in your mind? And then Corey as the third guy, and they don't have. I mean, they got the Holyfield kid. They signed the kid. What was it, Warren or Wallace? As an as an undrafted guy from Cincinnati, right? But do you think Boston Scott has a definitive roster spot?
Yeah, no question. He earned that role down the stretch last season. The Eagles really like him. The Eagles really thought he played well. And I agree with him, by the way. He was one of those, and we all lumped him in as the practice squad guys. And I said, Boston Scott is the one guy who just flat out played well. Practice squad, however you want to label him. He showed a lot of things late in the season as far as being a complimentary back. There's always going to be some size issues and some concern about traffic from that standpoint. A lot of ways like Darren Sproles. I mean, he's got a similar build, and he's going to be a similar type player as far as being a third down back. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to be like Darren Sproles because Darren Sproles was one heck of a player in his younger days, and he's still got a lot of work to get to that level. But he earned his role, and he's not. When you talk about the Eagles and how they feel about what their roster is going to be, he's not a guy who's in pencil. He's in pen.
All right, John. By the way, we talk about veterans, and I mentioned Paul Richardson. He's, a decent player, decent wide receiver. Logan Ryan, I would think that if Logan Ryan was on this team, he'd probably start across Darius Slay, right? I mean, has been pretty big. What about Alec Ogletree, too, at linebacker? I saw his name still available out there. I mean, he's a veteran linebacker. He's got to be better than everybody you have, right?
Well, yeah, it's one of those things. But the Eagles, would he be better next year? Yeah, probably. I mean, because we talked about the draft picks and Davion Taylor from Colorado. I mean, there's a guy with a tremendously high upside, but very, very raw player. But he's on the team. I mean, that's a third-round pick. And then you have Sean Bradley later, who's also very athletic, a little farther along, but not as gifted as Taylor. But, I mean, you drafted these guys for a reason. So you're not looking to get a guy who might be a little bit better for a really, really short term. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Eagles are looking in that direction. They were able to add bodies and linebackers similar to wide receiver. Now, maybe you're not happy with those bodies, but that's how they're looking at it. And from their perspective, if they were forced to play today, and even if you want to fast forward to training camp and that gets started on time, Nate Gary and TJ Edwards are going to be the two linebackers that are starters on day one. Those are the two guys that they're counting on and hoping Taylor and Bradley can develop and certainly be special teams players early in their careers.
John McMullen, Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN at JF McMullen. A couple things around the NFL that we will dive into here as well. One, the New York Post is reporting the NFL is considering scheduling more Saturday games if the NCAA season is postponed. So it seems like the NFL is saying, look, not only are we moving on, we're going to take every day of the week if we can get it.
Well, they want to get as many games in as possible, make it as easy as possible. So I think, if college isn't playing, I think that gives you a little bit of a window to get a little bit more easy from a schedule standpoint, because we talked about, these contingencies and where teams are going to be playing. Are they going to be neutral fields? Are you going to be able to play in so-called hot spots like New York or North Jersey or even Philadelphia or Detroit or places like that, the California, because of the politics of that state. So in theory, worst case scenario, you might be forced to be playing games in some neutral sites, and it's easier to get that done the more days you have at your disposal.
Yeah, definitely. I get. And then yesterday there was the report, definitely, where they talked about the one Saturday game going to be on the Amazon platform as well. So the NFL seems to be finding ways to still be making money throughout all this thing, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because, they furloughed a bunch of people. Most of the executives, people making more than $100,000 a year, took pay cuts just this week. Roger Goodell's not taking a salary
Right.
This year. So they are doing some things in acknowledgement. And it's interesting for me. I for whatever reason, WWE took a big hit for this because it was so quick after Vince McMahon declared the XFL essentially bankrupt by furloughing people and cutting people. And, you're saying to yourself, the NFL hasn't lost any money to this point. Remember, this started after the season. You could argue the draft, but that's not a big impact on the bottom line, the live revenue, at least, aspect of the draft. TV still went on as normal. So there hasn't been a significant hit. Again, if you're talking about merchandising, talking about people not being able to purchase maybe what they used to be able to purchase, again, drop in the bucket when you compare it to TV money and what the NFL makes from that perspective. So there hasn't been a huge financial hit, and they're still furloughing people. And that's been the criticism of every company that's financially well off. Did you really have to pull the trigger on that so quickly? And the answer to that is probably no. But, hey, businesses are in business to make money.
Yep. And last one or so here as we football at 4 every day at this time. Johnny Mac, Andy Dalton released today, which is interesting because obviously a lot of people kind of talked about Dalton as a fit for the Patriots. And here they are, the 9-year starter down there, been to the playoffs many times. Now, there's some reports that the Jaguars have interest in him, but Andy Dalton on the free agent market. Now, we saw the deal that Jameis Winston just got. What do you think happens with Andy Dalton here? Does he have a starting job this season?
Well, the Patriots are the most interesting because they haven't shown much interest. But remember, they haven't shown much interest. I think he was scheduled to get $17 million a year this year. So obviously nobody was going to trade for Andy Dalton. They knew the Bengals weren't going to pay him that to be a backup quarterback, so they knew ultimately he would be released. So the fact that they hadn't shown interest to this point isn't very meaningful to me. I do, find it very hard to believe that the Patriots are going to move forward with Jarrett Stidham and say this is our starting quarterback. And I could see, for as much as people criticize Andy Dalton, as you mentioned, he made the playoffs a heck of a lot in Cincinnati early in his career. And, hey, I look at that AFC East, and people are jumping the gun. You give the Patriots Andy Dalton, I bet you Bill Belichick wins 10 games and wins that division again.
Right. If they brought Dalton in there, they would probably be the favorites again. As much as people don't like Dalton, he's been a guy who's been to the playoffs with a heck of a lot, worse circumstances.
Yeah, they would be the favorites to me. So that would make most sense to me. You mentioned Jacksonville as well. That would make a lot of sense because I don't think anybody can trust Gardner Minshew. So I do think they have to go in a different direction, get at least a bridge quarterback. So ultimately, I think those are the two most natural spots where he could be a starting quarterback. And then you have Cam Newton. People kind of leave him out of the equation as well. But hey, that's sort of the Eagles tag with Jalen Hurts. And what I said yesterday, there's never, ever 32 quarterbacks in this league that you're comfortable with. So there's always teams looking for quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I know we're still we're a week from the draft and a week in a day. You know, they made the pick on Friday night, and people are still trying to figure out why the heck they took Jalen Hurts. But I don't know if you saw the Yahoo poll that asked 120 college football coaches who the biggest draft steals were. And, of course, just to stick it to the Eagles fans a little bit more, the Big 12 coaches and college coaches said Jalen Hurts, he was one of the steals of the draft.
Well, I don't think that would stick it to him. I think that's saying the Eagles made a good decision.
Oh, no. But it's like just to say to the people, you know, that don't understand the pick or don't like the pick, and here's just another positive review of, hey, that was a smart pick. You got a steal of the draft. This is going to be a guy who's going to be, you know, really, you know, basically a good pro.
Yeah, well, I don't think that addresses. I think that talks about what coaches think about Jalen Hurts, and that's what, you know, you read any scouting report, and you can pick out the flaws like any quarterback from a trait standpoint. But when it comes to character things, and obviously coaches stress that, and the fact that he's a leader, and the fact that he's a winner. And, you know, some people might argue it's easy to win at Alabama and Oklahoma, but not at the level he did. It's still difficult. So I think all of that stuff is good. But, you know, the people who have criticized the pick, and I'm one of them, if he is a good player, in theory, you will never know it because he'll never get the chance here unless Carson Wentz gets hurt. That's number one. And the second is, if he is that big of a leader, if he is that good of a player, why isn't he going to want to play? Why isn't he going to push that? And that's what I kind of discussed a little bit yesterday about having the mentality of a backup quarterback. Nick Foles was happy being a backup quarterback. Is Jalen Hurts going to be happy being a backup? Maybe he is.
Right.
But in theory,
I agree with that. I don't think he's going to be.
Yeah, in theory, if you're the leader, if you're the alpha male, if you're the winner, you're not going to be happy being a backup quarterback.
Nope. That's a good point. John McMullen, Football at 4, at JF McMullen. Use the hashtag football at 4. And, of course, we'll do it again tomorrow as the NFL offseason continuing to develop here. We'll take a closer look at how these rookies might fit in to the rosters on offense and defense on tomorrow's show. And Football at 4. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
And John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.